today's web. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're happy that you can make out the time today to join this. What's going to be a very interesting talk today. Today, engineering is going to be meeting architecture. Most of the time, architects and engineers always have very interesting, it's always very interesting the way architects and engineers work together in terms of how it could be conflicting sometimes. But today we're going to discuss that, and we have no other but Ali Mangera. I hope I pronounced that well. Who will be giving us that talk. But just before he goes on, I'll call our chairman, Theo Vosun Odulami, to welcome us formally and kickstart the day. So over to you, my chairman. You're on mute, sir.
Thank you so much for that, Engineer Chedu, and it's just a pleasure. It's a pleasure once again to be here, and I want to first of all commend the wonderful effort of these executive members of this London branch. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. We've come a long way, and we are braving the storm. COVID is being abated one way or the other, and we are seeing the horizon along at the end of the tunnel. And it's so wonderful to have you back with us again after maybe a couple of weeks off. Please, once you join us, please keep yourself muted, and you will be asked to unmute if there's any need for any question. And if you have anything that is quite urgent, you can just raise a hand, and then we can let you know. And also, for those of us that will be looking forward to going back to work, yes, we must have got our 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccination, but I would definitely advise we still keep adherently to the 2-meter gap, and at the same time, wash our hands in terms of the protocol. And also make sure if you have to go to site, I know most of us are engineers, make sure you take care of yourself by wearing masks and adhere strictly to the health and safety rules on site. It's best to be safe and for us to go back to our families after every day's work. The summer is really showing itself now, and we will be doing activities as a branch. And so we might be calling upon each one of us as time goes on for us to let us know exactly what we are doing in the pipeline, and things are going to roll out as soon as possible. Last but not the least, I want to inform us that we've just finished a batch of interviews for new members for Nigerian Institute of Engineers, people that want to join as members. And the next one is coming up in July. If you are still interested to be a member of the NSC as a whole in Nigeria, you can do that through us here in London. We process your application, and also by paying your annual dues to us, we are going to be paying also your annual subscription to the headquarters through that. And we can facilitate your interview to be processed without any hitch, because definitely you are coming through the branch. That's one of the services we render to our members. And then, yes, the membership is growing, and I know definitely we'll be up to a lot of things. Thank you very much. And I believe you're going to have a wonderful time this afternoon during this webinar. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. So without much ado, I will attempt to introduce our speaker today. It's a wonderful topic: architecture, engineering for social applications, cultural change. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful topic, and it's none other but Ali Mangeri. Have I pronounced it well? Mangera. I'm so sorry. Sorry. Yeah, a lot of people pronounce my name poorly, so maybe we fall into the same shoes. But what's interesting about his background is he's an architect engineer, and he's uniquely placed. In fact, he's had so much experience collaborating across the sector in academia, in industry. You know, he's going to be, in fact, he's going to be discussing the social impact of, you know, of technology, of, you know, architectural engineering. And so without much ado, I will not go, because his his qualifications are just so long. He's super qualified, super experienced. I wouldn't bore us with you know, so much information, but I'd like us to know that in 2007, Ali co-founded Mangera Architects. I think Mangera Vars Architects, with offices in London and Barcelona, Spain, working on various projects globally and winning numerous awards, with decades of experience on a range of schemes, from mega projects to special product design. Ali has committed to successful and successfully delivering sustainable projects with lasting legacy, which he'll, you know, I'm sure he'll be able to talk about as well. He's also not just an architect or, you know, an engineer. He's, you know, he's ahead of things with big data, digital fabrication, and you know, I would suspect, you know, digital twins as well. So allow me introduce to you Ali Mangera. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. It's
Yeah.
such a tremendous honor to be here today. And right. I mean, Dr. P has been trying to organize this for some time, and he's talked a lot about your organization. So, and you know, we're just really thrilled to bits. I'm in Moscow right now. And you know, I was traveling away on business, and I still wanted to, because Dr. Sunday was like, you sure you want to do it? I'm like, of course I want to do it. This is like one of the highlights of, you know, of my weekend, certainly. So you know, how did it all start? You know, I didn't want to be an engineer at the beginning. Like Nigerian parents, you know, your parents are saying, well, go and do something where you can actually, you know, get a job and earn some money, guys. And so I was like, okay, well, I really didn't want to do it. So I ended up at Leeds with Dr. Sunday, and I wasn't the best, but somehow I managed to get through and actually had a really good time. So I got onto the course, and I even went to America on an exchange program. We did a master's there, came back, finished engineering, you know, and one of the things that was kind of inspiring when I was studying there was we did this topic called public health engineering, and you know, the gentleman, the professor who was taking the course, said to us, you know, engineers save more lives than doctors, you know, around the world, and you should really be aware of that. And my sister's a doctor, so I said to my sister, is this true? And she said, of course it's true. And I'm a doctor, but you know, it's true, because you know, all the sanitation, all the infrastructure that goes in. So, and you know, so I'm quite, you know, I was quite amazed, but obviously very proud of what that means. You know, engineering for social and cultural change. So what is engineering, starting with? Well, you know, obviously, historically or traditionally, civil and mechanical, you know, there's typical disciplines that everyone knows about, the hardcore engineering. In more recent years, it's genetics, computational, space travel, many other disciplines. They all fit under the engineering kind of umbrella. Is engineering good? I mean, yes, it is good. You know, we do save more lives than doctors. We've done the internet, we've created the internet, we've gone to space. So we must be great. You know, engineers must be doing something really fantastic. But let us not forget engineering. And you know, I speak as you know, I identify myself. My parents are South African, so obviously you guys are a Nigerian society. I understand where you're coming from. We left South Africa because of apartheid. So we understand actually there's a lot in engineering that people think, oh, this is just a passive, you know, has no bias in it. It has plenty of bias, guys. You all know that, you know, algorithmic bias is something that everyone's now talking about. All kinds of other ways of, you know, innate bias that is inside engineering and how engineers think. Women in the profession. I mean, you name it, there are so many glass ceilings there for people of color to achieve their rightful goals and potential to fulfill. And I think, so me looking at it as an architect, later on became an architect and an engineer, and also someone of color, I think the idea of engineering for social and cultural change is not just about engineering, it's about engineering society in a way, and using the tools of engineering and methodology of engineering, and trying to propose and try to come up with ideas that can benefit us all and is much more inclusive. So here are just some examples of some engineers, well-known engineers, but actually they're not really in the history books. You have to look for them. These are African-American engineers. This gentleman here ended up being a governor of the US Virgin Islands. This lady here was a female engineer in the 1900s. And you have to understand the bias that was taking place at the time. So there has to be representation. And we have to have a proper and full role in what is happening. And society needs to mirror, mirror the people that make up that society. So in other words, a much more inclusive profession, but also a profession which I think measures outcomes. So our philosophy of our office is threefold. So we have three kind of core beliefs. One is a people-centric approach, which is essentially about how we run our practice, the ethical practice that we try to have. The architects that come to work for us, we try to have, I mean, one of the most diverse practices by kind of numbers in the UK. I mean, we've got a very high number of all different types of people, and I think that really enriches our work environment. Second thing is obviously very topical right now is planet, and us as architects, engineers, we need to have that real focus of planet. And the third one is prosperity. So when I say prosperity, I don't just mean how much money a project will make, or how much benefit you'll give to the client, but to instill values into the client that I think is a win-win situation. So if you're building a school, you're creating future graduates that are going to go off and commit their energy to society. And I think these are the kind of ideas that we would like to engage with as a practice. And we use this right the way. We have a kind of a methodology that we apply to all of our projects. Always the three kind of core aims of people, planet, and prosperity. And that then leads to innovative architecture. So every project we do, we try to do something different. We try to learn from what we've done before and try to always set about creating new goals and new ideas. This is just a quick run through of some of our projects globally. We're working from smart campuses to eco towers, mega projects, port projects, World Cup stadia. But the methodology, so as engineers, I'm sure you're going to think, wow, this looks really clear, but it's basically a diagram that explains how if you take the RIBA stages of work, in terms of if you're structural or civil engineers, you'll understand that there are set stages of work. So what we do is that we sit down with the client and stakeholders and the design team, and we set about creating goals for people, planet, and prosperity. And that then translates into principles. And then we develop that and integrate that into a project. So for example, and these are very specific, project-specific goals. So for example, if you're doing, let's say, a community center somewhere in London, you will have certain goals that you might say, well, I want that community center to be very inclusive. I want that community center to also bring in, a large number of women to participate in it. I want to do, so you set yourself these goals. And at each stage, at each work stage, you measure those goals. So the important thing here is to set the goals, measure the outcome, set the goals, measure the outcome at each stage of the project, right the way through. And at the end, you can say, well, my intention was to do this at the start, and this is the output, and this is what I think is the contribution in terms of people, planet, and prosperity. So those are the kind of main metrics that we use and methodology we use. I'm going to kind of skip this because these are just some of the team, but just quickly to understand that we're very much focused on having a diverse team. Now, one of the problems we've had as an office, I would say as an office of a person of color, is that we just don't get those graduates in. We've been fortunate. We've had one Nigerian intern, but we really think that that's a big problem, because they're just not studying the courses. They feel maybe architecture is not for them, maybe engineering is for them, I don't know. But we've tried to be as inclusive as possible, and a lot of our team at different levels, come from different countries, China, Middle East, all around the world. We try to work with people. We try to have projects when we're looking at any project. We try to also understand what the community thinks. So we will sit there and engage with local community, because if you're doing a project in Southwark, which is 45% or 49% non-white, you need to know what your customers are, who they are, how they think, what they want, and I think it's really important to kind of identify with that. Going forward, in terms of our kind of, what is really striking is that we now have this big baggage I have this big baggage of engineering, and I try to kind of bring it into the projects, because I've had this exposure at Leeds and also Leeds and other universities. Engineering is like one of the main things that I always start with, and it's always about how to demystify engineering, how to set yourself certain goals. So here, for example, on the bottom left is computational fluid dynamics. It's about how we will measure airflow through a particular site in this is 10 buildings we're doing in Jeddah. Here's a eco tower, and then on the right hand side, a much more kind of simple approach to how orientation can work in terms of sustainability, how we can use, so going back to cultural values and cultural engineering, how we can use traditional techniques in terms of cooling, which are not necessarily high-tech approaches. At the same time, how we can use data. This is now using big data to shape buildings, to kind of give a parametric approach to design. So I don't think this is a solution. What it is, these are just tools. So here you can take an idea of a building footprint, and you can have plugins that then tell you the financial implications of changing the floor plate, changing the form of the building, and then obviously you could plug in other information, like you could create community benefit in there, and it will tell you. So I think these are using new tools to create ways of understanding a project, how we work with big teams and in terms of collaboration. Going back to the kind of hardcore engineering, I mean, we've been using some of those big BIM ideas since 2008. We started on this project. So every project we use, we create a digital platform for all information. And that has enabled us. The idea of using BIM in 2008 was quite radical for a very complex project of very complex geometry. But we managed to pull it through. We worked with Arup, very closely with Arup. And we almost gave up. Arup almost gave up too, because BIM in those days wasn't yet set up properly for taking all that data. But now things have got better. But so this is a starting with a project in terms of cultural and social value. Very interesting project. It's a university on the Education City campus in Doha, which is a campus where there are many university buildings by very famous architects, including OMA, Cesar Pelli, Isazaki did a project. We were given the site on the corner, and we started looking at, it's basically a university with a mosque. Primarily, it's a university. It's about 41,000 square meters. And then there's another component, which is this big dome structure, which is actually the mosque. And here we're looking at how the tiling, this is a drone footage of the dome of the mosque. So it's kind of an actual building, and how kind of traditional patterns, taking the idea of traditional patterns that is then reinterpreted in a very modern and contemporary way. The building itself is this kind of route between learning and praying. So there's a kind of a infinite spiral between, let's say, prayer space and learning space, because it's incumbent on a Muslim to always seek knowledge. So this idea of faith and knowledge being entwined in a kind of infinite spiral was the kind of rationale for the project. And beyond that, we question also, some of the Islamic ideas, some of the Islamic principles. So for example, why are women, for example, you go to a mosque, why are women put on the top balcony? I mean, there's nothing in the Quran which prescribes that. And we talked to Her Highness Sheikha Moza, who was then the head of the university, but also the emir's wife. And she said, well, when you go to Mecca, women and men pray together. I mean, they pray on the same level. They're not necessarily separated. So why can't women pray at the same level as men? So you just need to put aside an area, and it's obviously separate from the men, but on the same level, and that equalizes it to some extent. So we're quite keen on bringing women into the fold, and making people debunk the idea that this is has a lot of male patronage behind it. This is now the kind of approach to the building, and how light comes through. So this idea of culture is really, really important. So on the left is the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, and then here on the right is a photograph of our building with sky, with a kind of celestial idea of being inside stars. So that's a, and then here on the left are the minarets, and then our reinterpretation of that, and how these minarets have this kind of iconic sense, but they also point in the direction of Mecca, which is quite good if you're on campus. And then how the gardens and landscape, they create microclimates. So this is me again thinking about my engineering, thinking how do I, I've always been taught, engineers, are thinking like this, and it's adversarial. But me, I'm like one person. I'm a combination, and I see it as like, the two have to come together. Here, what we try to do, we notice that the campus has one building after another, but they're not joined up. The space in between, the glue, isn't yet there. So what we tried to create was this glue using landscape, and through that create kind of sustainable corridors or microclimates. And it's very important to create these outdoor learning spaces in the hot environment, but they're also based on this kind of Islamic idea of a 4-part Islamic garden. So there's a kind of a modern idea and also kind of a traditional idea. Here, see the building complete. So this is a photograph, not a kind of a computational image. These minarets, by the way, as engineers, I'm sure you'll be aware, they are almost like 90 meters high. I think they're the 3rd tallest in the world, and they're cantilevered. So the support is cantilevered 10 meters back. So when we talk to Arab, because our original idea was to cantilever it back, and Arab said, no, you can't do that. This is impossible. And so we took that on board, but we started challenging it because I'm an engineer. So I'm starting to question, like, can you really not do that? Or, I always like to kind of question, really push them a bit. And in the end, the client was like, well, if we want it like this, cantilever, we're going to have it like this, and Arab has to make it happen. So it was kind of crazy, but it gave them a big challenge. But here you see in the middle, there are dampers, and it was wind tunnel tested. And there's 1,000 tons of steel in each one of these, and they are like dampers. So in case it kind of blows in the wind, oscillates. This is a drone footage of the building. You can see it. I don't know if it's if the video is playing, it should play. Yeah, this is taken maybe 2 years ago, but we had great fun designing this building, but also kind of, we're not silly, because as an engineer, how do you save money? So original idea was to have a diagrid inside the building, but that proved to be quite costly. So we worked on other ways of doing things in a cheaper way, and also optimizing the building form. What's nice about this back elevation, or the way the building sits, it's a huge building, but it lands really gently on the ground, and the landscape just flows through it. And so we're creating these indoor-outdoor blurring between spatial ambiguity between indoor and outdoor, as the landscape just flows through the building. And then if we look at the inside, we created gardens. So these are gardens of olive groves, which kind of is a symbolic plant. So here it's going back to the culture. So symbolic plant, the olive tree, in Christian faith, Abrahamic faith, is a symbol of peace. So that's kind of the focal point of the garden in the center of the main courtyard. Here we have the calligraphy on the walls, and in order not to have the sunlight come through the building, and then you get people walking on the letters of God, because you're going to be seeing the shadows, we had to create a second screen to kind of diffuse the shadow. So we're thinking about these things and thinking about the repercussions of what we're doing, even though they haven't yet happened, even though someone hasn't thought, oh, I'm walking on the letters of God, we want to kind of preempt that and make sure it doesn't happen. This is the inside of the mosque at night with the kind of starlights. Underneath, we have the 5 pillars of Islam holding up the building. So each pillar is ingrained with calligraphy that refers to one of the pillars of Islam. The internal spaces are very sculptural, very organic in a sense. So we couldn't afford the diagrid, but what we then did was to take the ceiling panels and create a kind of a diagrid sensation. So this is just using the kind of plasterboarding in the library to create this diagrid sensation. And here is the auditorium, the main entrance to the mosque. And then here you see the construction. So again, going back to the engineering. So how do you make a double curve without spending money on a double curve and all that formwork, all that additional kind of work? So here, what you can just about see, each panel is triangulated. So the triangulation together gives this impression of a double curve, but actually they are not double curve, they're just triangulated panels. And we use BIM from, as I said, from 2008. So we were kind of working out the tiling. Here we were doing the tiling and optimization of the cladding panels. I think we have 1,000 different panels, but they were all done in a way where we went straight from the drawings into production, the digital fabrication. And then this is kind of some of the academic school part of the university, the minarets again. Inside is another story, because inside we wanted to tell the story of Islam and the history of Islamic architecture. So we in the corridors, we purposefully created, we took photographs of 100 monuments, more than 100 monuments around the world, and digitized them and printed them onto these kind of graphics. And it kind of tells this kind of story of the different regions. So, you know, we would have a section on Mughal India, Arabia, Spain, and so on and so forth, in order to kind of educate the students about their faith and the way the building sits on the landscape. And then the student entrance, and from the campus from afar, and from the back. So I'm going to go to the next project, if I can quickly talk about, sorry, before I go to the next project. So value. Okay, this is going back to the first thing about how do we get value. Okay, so one of the things was we want women to participate in this building. So we set ourselves certain goals, women, construction workers. So, you know, what is interesting about a mosque is that you bring together people of different class. You know, there are people who are printers who are coming to pray, and there are people who are working on a building site. So, you know, we want to bring people to, and students, obviously you get this mix of people. And I think that's a really interesting mix. And, you know, we're trying to do that obviously in all our projects. So here we set these goals, we're setting ourselves goals of LEED or sustainability goals. And then we kind of measure that throughout the project and see what's achieved and what's not achieved, or what we need to do better. This is a project that I'm actually in Russia for at the moment. I'm in a place called Sochi. Just tell me, there's a video going to play here now. Okay, so hopefully it'll play. Let's see if it does. There's also sound with it. So if you can hear the sound. So the project is for a new land reclamation on the seafront, about 3 kilometers or 2.5 kilometers long. And our idea, we're inspired by a forest that's right next door. So we want to create Russia's first kind of smart ecological city. So this is the idea of creating this ring. And I'm going to quickly run through this because it's a bit long. But it's essentially to create these floating gardens, which become this project on the seafront. I'm going to show you. So that here you see the landscape that becomes the buildings, and then we redesign the whole seafront. Eventually, we get to a point where we want to use seawater. So this is going back to my engineering roots. So how do you use seawater to actually create hydrogen to power the building? So obviously using renewables to create that process, the catalytic process of separating hydrogen and oxygen, and using the hydrogen in order to power the buildings, and actually also producing oxygen, you know, that kind of helps to clean the environment. So this is So it's basically these buildings which have a kind of a really high sustainability component. We were looking, so as an engineer, I'm always curious about what are the latest trends, what's happening now. There are ways and means of actually extracting carbon from the air, which is probably 1,000 times more efficient than trees. And I think with Imperial College and with what you guys are doing, I think we need to start looking at these issues very seriously. And it kind of goes back into this whole idea of people, planet, and prosperity, because now we're talking about the planet, and the planet's going to affect all of us. So we need to think, how can architecture provide this kind of role? If I'm going to move on to the next slide, because this is a bit long. This is a project now we're doing. It's under construction in Jubail. It's another mosque project. Very interesting because it's on the seafront, and here the idea is to create something very precious. So next to the seafront being a shell type structure. Why is that kind of tied in with the local culture? Because this part of the world, on that seafront, they used to have pearl diving, and they used to kind of make their living from pearls. So the idea of religion, of faith, being very precious. And here we're using different kind of analytics in order to understand how to deliver the project, the facade schemes. This is now during the construction phase, when I was there a few months ago. So how we then take look, the render on the top, and then the construction, and then obviously the sustainability aspect. So that's me. Go to the next slide, second. This is quite an interesting project. This is downtown Musharraf, which is, if any of you have been to the Middle East, you'll appreciate that a lot of the Middle East has been designed very, very poorly. I mean, Dubai is a prime example of places which are not really cities, but just big roads. So as engineers, I mean, I know that sometimes you just get given a task of building a road, but I think we need to start questioning, because we need to start thinking, how do people live in cities? How do people live historically in cities in Nigeria, or in the Middle East, or in the UK? We live in cities which are quite compact, which are I think you can walk around, where now everyone is talking about the 15-minute city. So all your amenities are within a 15-minute walk. And this is what we try to do. So we were one of the architects. There were, I think, 6 or 7, and it won the Civic Trust Award, the UK award for the city centre of Doha. And it's about creating public space. It's about creating, walkable city. A walkable city in the Middle East is a really rare thing. It doesn't really happen anywhere, except in the real historic city. So here we're looking at kind of historic buildings and reinterpreting that in a modern way. This is our reinterpretation of the traditional patterns and how the building sits in the context. And I think this has got a lead gold, which is almost like, I think it's BREEAM excellent or close to excellent, outstanding, in between excellent and outstanding. This is a really interesting project in London. It's under construction. It's for a community group from East Africa. I think they migrated to the UK from Tanzania. Originally they were Asian, and what they wanted to do was to create a faith center for their faith. I think they're Shia. And so we took this idea. It's currently under construction. It's a very, very complicated site next to a river, and we've created a deep basement for the sports hall. It's one of the things they wanted. The Mayor of London was talking about it. Why was he talking about it? Because the project, as we were talking to the client, we convinced, well, I wouldn't say convinced, because the client was already kind of thinking the same thing. The client and us collectively, we wanted the project to be more than just a project for one faith. Because, when you build a church or a mosque or a synagogue, quite often what happens is that you exclude everybody else. And what we need to be now talking about is including everybody else, because actually we see faith buildings as embassies rather than an exclusive fortress for one belief. Because by having dialogue, by creating spaces for dialogue, what you're doing is you're breaking down those barriers, you're breaking down all those divisions between us, which actually shouldn't exist. I mean, I'm sure you have issues in your countries, and in this country for sure we have issues. We need to come together because actually we're all part of one human race. So here on this project, we're now explaining, so you see these different patterns on the facade. So these patterns are relating to that historic journey that the client took. So obviously originally they came from Persia, they migrated to India, then they went to Africa, to Tanzania, and then they moved to the UK. So all these patterns on the facade are referring to that. And eventually they land in the UK, and we have patterns by William Morris, who is kind of a very interesting character, because he was also inspired by the Islamic faith and by Islamic geometric patterns. So we're incorporating that into the facade system, and it's a very subtle story, but it's also like I think it's very important to be able to tell the story to the public, so that they see it's building, but it's also something more. And here we see the goals and some of the metrics, how we achieve that. This is a little bit different, just from engineering point of view. We're working on the Sagrada Familia Cathedral in Barcelona, which is, I mean, if you're an engineer, architect, this is the one for you guys. Obviously, Gaudi didn't finish his work. So I don't know if you know the story, but Gaudi got run over by a tram, and he was dressed so poorly, like in very bad clothes, that they didn't think he was an architect of the Sagrada Familia. They thought he was just some guy in the street. So they basically took him to hospital, and they didn't treat him because they thought he was like a pauper, as in that he died. So that's what happened. And long story short is that now we're kind of involved with finalizing the project. So here we see how we incorporate this kind of parametric modeling using Grasshopper into the kind of structural model, in order to also finalize the scheme, because there are no drawings now. There are no drawings of the scheme, and we have to kind of improvise. We're finishing one of the main facades, and also doing one of the chapels inside the building. This is a World Cup stadium. We got shortlisted with Foster. Well, we were competing against Foster. We didn't win this one, but we got to do the interior of the stadium, which is already quite impressive. We were inspired by calligraphy. So, this big idea of Arabic calligraphy, and the letters rolling over themselves and becoming this huge arcade. So again, how structure and culture can combine in a very kind of poetic, let's say, I mean, this is not Calatrava, because Calatrava, let's say, would do an impressive structure, but this is, I think, one step beyond, because this is about the importance of letters, the importance of words and language, and how that can be then communicated to the public through the letters that we create for the stadium. And then this is just the kind of the construction phase, which is now kind of through the process. We worked in Libya. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed, I have to say, we like to go to places. We like to go to places that people just don't think about going to. This is before the revolution, so it was still during the time of Gaddafi. And what happened is that they had many sites that they just abandoned, and this is one of the sites that they just abandoned. This is in the south near Niger, so it's on the border with Niger, and they have these mud brick structures which are just left. It's a legacy, and we thought that was really cool to kind of, we wanted to reuse that actually to make this eco hotel, which is one of the things we were doing, so we couldn't really use it because it was so flimsy, it was so fragile that, in the end, it was like more an idea of retaining it in the background, linking it, using the ruins as a kind of a gardenscape, and then creating these single-story buildings which become the eco hotel. So one of the ideas here is to how we can use local materials, and how we can build something that can be maintained by local people without us, being around. It can just be maintained without much cost as well. So looking at local patterns and how we can construct it. This project, I think, is super interesting. It's a project that we did in Morocco, and it's for it was a former municipal dump site. So what happened is that in this town in south, which is just next to Rabat, there was a lot of clay, and people extracted the clay, and then when all the clay went, they just filled it with garbage. So what actually happened was that the garbage was then contaminating the watercourse, and kids were playing. You had like landfill gas, which was escaping, and the agricultural land was also contaminated. It was a horrible, horrible place. And it was right next to an urban area, which became a slum. So these are pictures from that area. So what we then did, working with the municipality, was obviously the garbage was then contained and then re-landscaped. And the idea was to create a horticultural school on the site. And so these are different kind of approaches that we had at the beginning in order to do that. to rehabilitate the landscape. And then one of the things that we love the most is that we built the building out of earth, out of the soil from the ground. So we're using clay bricks and a very kind of simple construction. It's a very, very heavy kind of roof, but because actually they don't have the finesse of probably what you guys are doing, you know, they don't have that kind of, but it was a cost issue, and the contractor knows how to do certain things, so he just did a very big thick roof, but it actually helps in terms of keeping the thing quite cool. So you know, we create this kind of very porous building made of kind of clay bricks. But what is really, really important, what is really impressive is that we gave opportunities and jobs to the locals to develop the clay bricks and to kind of, and what we discovered was that many of the skills that you had, or the historic skills of making clay bricks, had actually been lost. So the project had a tremendous value in terms of providing or reskilling the local community, and then these people would then go off and work on other projects, because there are many clay brick buildings in Morocco. So now they have employment. The landscape is rehabilitated, and also on top of that, we've created a gardening school, which then provides jobs. And it's become a real community project. So you know, you're growing plants and you're selling those plants, and all the benefits are going back to the community. So it's not a project that you do for you know, for a large fee. It's a project you do because it has a kind of a meaning above and beyond you know, anything else. So obviously very, very different to our other projects, but it has a certain sense of what it is trying to achieve. So in terms of the goals, we managed to save 255,000 tons of CO2. And we also produced enough energy. I forgot to tell you. So this is Morocco's first landfill gas capture facility within this project. So when they contained all the waste, they also managed to take the landfill gas, and that gas is then powering some of the homes, and it provided energy for, I think, a certain amount of time. So it was useful all around. It now has saved CO2, provides energy, and also gives jobs to the community. So we love that idea. It's a project in Madagascar. We adopted a little girl from Madagascar, so we ended up working there. So this is very much about, you know, our love for Madagascar and the kind of traditions. We wanted to build this building out of wood based on the kind of local traditions, but unfortunately the client didn't really buy into that. So he wanted something much more kind of robust in that sense. But I mean, in our opinion, the timber would have worked just as well. But anyway, it's a kind of a gallery project as well. So I mean, it's providing community functions as well for the local area. So that's kind of us. There's a few other things in here which I think I'm going to just, if we have time, I can quickly run through it. Aga Khan Academy, also in Madagascar. This is quite a different type of building. It's if any of you know Madagascar, obviously it's got a traditional architecture. What is really, really surprising is that a lot of the history of Madagascar is not necessarily from the African continent, but from Borneo, because a lot of people migrated from Borneo. And therefore the architecture from Madagascar is very typical of the historic architecture of Borneo, which has these kind of very sharp roofs. And somehow the colonial tradition also kind of picked up on that. So our idea for the school was to create the school made of brick, let's say, because brick is another very traditional building material in Madagascar, and using this kind of carving patterns, and then creating the school which has schools within schools. So breaking down the idea of the school, creating smaller and smaller communities, and how those communities can come together, and then going back to the science and the engineering, you know, how we measure wind flow across it. You know, other ideas like, you know, let's talk about human waste, how human waste can be recycled for energy. You know, I mean, these projects in Africa, I mean, obviously you guys are, and I know Dr. P is working there quite a bit. You know, there's so many ways that we can design things in a much more sustainable way, which actually are quite sensible. You know, we've lost that in many parts of, you know, obviously the developed or Western world. They don't think about that anymore. And I think we're being very silly about how we spend our resources. But you can see that you know, the idea of the patterning, the local patterning and the resources. This is quick kind of, we've got time, a quick kind of a summary of a project that we were looking at for a digital art museum. It's in Saudi capital. This building here is the first building in Saudi Arabia, the historic center. So it was effectively the where they had the G20 summit recently, hence this kind of image. And it's called the Emirate of Diriyah. So built in 1774, and it's where the Saudi capital really started. And they're quite interested in this idea of vernacular. And we were thinking, how can you build vernacular, but a digital museum, but maybe we can use 3D printing and in clay. So we looked at the idea of how in Western tradition, you have, it's an Orientalist position. I mean, I'm sure you have this in museums in your country as well. There's this pervasive idea that the way we display things has to be in a certain way, in a very systematic way, like the British Museum, but there are other ways of doing it, a much more eclectic approach. We find that the idea of a market, is much more interesting, much more appealing than a kind of a very kind of traditional museum. And so and also the idea of randomness, of kind of, graffiti on walls, on public spaces, how you can make art accessible by putting it in the street rather than containing it in museums, how we can put, how we can create artist studios outside without necessarily being inside, how we can create immersive environments, and then taking this idea and taking the idea of traditional buildings that they have there, we started looking at how the traditional building can be modularized, because they're kind of higgledy-piggledy because of the size and nature of what materials and how they could carry materials. And then we looked at the idea of 3D printing to create more interesting, more inspiring forms, and how that then comes together and makes a fragment of the city, and how that then creates this kind of, I'm not sure this is going to come through. It's a bit pixelated my end, but oops. Yeah, so we're creating this very immersive, very contemporary environment, but made of clay, and a very simple building. So yeah, and that's just kind of to sum up quickly. We're taking these ideas to places, to London, for example. So for example, in London, we did a project with local communities, which is about reimagining faith. So local schools, and trying to kind of get them to understand. Try to create dialogue, because actually if you talk to kids early enough at a young age, what happens is that they can build an awareness of others. This is our daughter here. That's our daughter from Madagascar. That's my sister. And these are just people in the Tate. So we had a workshop in the Tate, and then we did a workshop with schools. We did a couple of months a project with a local school, and trying to create buildings of different faiths, and trying to get people to understand what that meant. We took this whole idea to Hong Kong. So we had a studio in Hong Kong, and we kind of worked with local students in Hong Kong and did a similar exercise in creating faith type buildings. And that's our daughter again. So that's kind of it. Again, this is just me the other day giving a talk on designing cities for all. And on the right is my partner, Ada, who's kind of pioneering a female champion, let's say, in our office. But that's us. That's kind of what we do. Thank you.
I think I'm very shocked, and I'm more shocked than impressed, because it's such a wonderful presentation you put together, and it's just mind-blowing what you do. And we have a number of questions here. And so I think I'll go through the question and answer. But before I do, I just want to say thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, I think to manage the question and answer session, I will invite Dr. Popola. Dr. Popola, sir, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Please, sir, I think you're the best person to take this question and answer session, because indeed it was a mind-blowing presentation, like you would agree.
I don't know about that. I will try my best, but I'm just talking into my panel. Yam, a Foriro, and a Jajube. Anyway, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, Right.
Okay.
Ali, I didn't expect anything less than what you've presented. If you have presented anything less than that, I will have fired you. So fantastic presentation. As Ali have said, I've known him for over 30 odd years, if not more than that. We went to university together. We did all our training together. He did pure architecture engineering, the architecture engineering, civil engineering with architecture. So more or less the same mind, but he then went on to do architecture properly, because I think architects, all they do is drawing windows and doors. But Ali has shown that more far than that. They're the kind of engineers I'm training now to be able to think, not just the mathematics side of it. Think of what you're going to put inside that computer before you even touch your keyboard. You know, the shape of the building, what that building is going to relate to in terms of culture, awareness, you know, all kinds of things you can think of. And that's what Ali and his company stands for. And I've done quite a few work with him, and he's an amazing guy. So let's go to the question and answer. I've asked people to put questions in the chat. I've only seen about 1 or 2 questions. So if you want to ask questions, please put it in the chat, and we will call you to either ask your question or we will ask the question for you. The only question I've seen in the chat is actually by Shinedu at the moment.
Yes. I'm blown away by his presentation, and I hope other questions come through as I ask mine now, sir. Can I go ahead?
Fire away.
Okay. Now, I think this will be a general question for all your projects, across all your projects. When it comes to designing, how do you refrain from designing at people and stick to designing with people? So what I mean is designing at your clients or stick to designing with your clients, because you have so many brilliant ideas on how you intend to use design to change the way people think. So how do you do that? And particularly with the Islamic building, the Islamic studies building, my question there really was, how was the concept developed? Was it a collaborative session? Did you have a multidisciplinary, team of, architects and engineers? Did you just speak at length with the client and draw out what was important to them? Again, did you design at them, or were you collaborative with them? How did you do it?
So it was a really interesting project, that one, because first of all, the client just wanted to talk to us. Just they said, "Oh, we have a site. We'd like to talk to you about the site." And we just sort of threw out. We didn't think the client was at all serious. Honestly, they just like, well, this is not our conversation. And then suddenly they phoned up at some ridiculous hour in the morning, and I said, "I'm too busy to talk to you." But they were serious, and they sent a whole delegation from Arab to check us out to make sure that we could actually do the job. Then we sat down. What we realized is that Sheikh Hamoza, because actually, if you understand the Middle East a little bit, Qatar is very different to UAE, very different to Saudi Arabia. Qatar is much more in tune with education, with culture. They're conservative in some ways, but they're actually they have very good outreach in terms of helping communities around the world in terms of education and lifting the level up. Okay, so they're not just focused on money and that kind of thing. And Sheikh Hamoza is very, very kind of pro getting women engaged in the whole thing. So Middle East has been very backwards historically, as you know. So what they said to us as we started the project is that they encouraged us to think. They encouraged us to say, well, question what you're doing, And so we were doing a thesis on what it meant before we even launched into the project. But they were very, very receptive. The thing is that if in a nutshell, what this building is trying to do, because there's a big pejorative view of Islamic architecture, Islamic space, put it this way, because at the time we were doing it, 2008, the whole idea of 9/11 was still there. The whole idea of, madrasas, of Islamic education, was very negative, right? So what they wanted to say was to the world was that you can build a building that has an Islamic education and university component, has a mosque, but can be really progressive, can throw out ideas, not just in terms of how it looks, but also in terms of how the program is. So they've got, within the school, they've got urbanism, they've got Islamic finance, they've got theology, they've got theological practice, they've got, you know, philosophy. So what they've done is they've gone back to the kind of spirit of what it must have been like in the Alhambra era. And they wanted to project that to the world. And that's why they were quite happy. We did this. Obviously, the building's got a lot of recognitions and awards. And through that, I think they've also helped to change the image. And I think, so we were really part of that process. We didn't go there. We weren't there trying to convince them. They already knew that they wanted something. So
okay, so it was a case where you had a very good client who knew exactly what they wanted. There wasn't any ping pong.
No,
they just went straight to the point.
Straight to the point, yeah.
Wow, that's good. I think we had a hand up from Bosun. Yes, so please go ahead and ask your question, sir.
Well, architect, that was fantastic, and you know what? I'm quite delighted that that we are having this at this particular moment. This is the kind of topic that separates the men from the boys in engineering and architecture. It's not for the lily-livered. You can see that definitely this kind of topic will not be so enterprising to maybe the mediocre minds. I'm not putting them down, but it's just for the intellectually endowed. And I thank God I'm part of it. As it is. My question is that you've mentioned a lot of things about sustainability, architecture, engineering. I'm a passionate disciple of value engineering. Because in all these things we've looked at, for example, Sochi, that is one colossal structure. You're talking about cost. If you look at the World Cup Stadium, that's another cost-intensive project you have been handling, right? Now, how do you inculcate value engineering into all these? Because now, all you've talked about now, you move from architecture to engineering, from engineering to project management, to project controls, health and safety, cost, social and environmental impact, sustainability. So how do you rope in value engineering into all this so that you can get the best at the cheapest cost? So
this is a very, very interesting question. Actually, the whole term value engineering is now being reassessed. And we're now, because we're just been interviewed for a framework in London. What they want to know is what is the social value, aside from what is the value in terms of, you know, the monetary value. It's not just about money side. It's also like, because if you think beyond, like, okay, we have a building and we're going to generate that many jobs, you have to look at the whole broad spectrum of value. If you're doing transport orientated development, what is the uplift in land prices? And you know what I mean. So there are many different aspects of value that need to be factored in. Obviously, we're not silly. We're not going to go there and provide something that just makes no sense financially. It has to stack up, right? There's a finite amount of capital, and that capital has to be made to work. Sometimes you don't get it right. I mean, when I say conceptually, we don't get it right, because sometimes we misread the client. Because in the case of Russia, for example, it's not that they don't see the value in it. It's just that they're not so far ahead like the UK in terms of their approach to sustainability. So when I was talking to the client, they said, well, gas is really cheap here, or like, petrol, oil is really cheap here. They're not seeing that actually in the West, we're phasing out. I think in 2 years' time, coal-fired power stations will produce energy at the same price as renewables. And I think it's happening in 2 or 3 other countries. So within 2 years, renewables will be as competitive. So what they have yet to understand is that they need to clean up their act. And sometimes it takes a long time, because if you were in Dubai 15 years ago and you talk about sustainability, I think you're from Mars. They wouldn't understand why you're talking about it. So I think there's a component which is client education. There is a component about thinking what is value aside from just the pure cost. Of course, if you have a commercial or a commercial developer, let's imagine that, and his remit is just, I need to get this. This is my pot of money. I would urge that developer to if at all possible, to have discussions with the local authority, to have discussions with the government, with institutions that can maybe provide additional resource in order to provide those wider benefits. Because I think in Nigeria, I'm sure you know that, you've got an oil industry that's not benefiting a lot of people, and as a consequence, you have other issues. So
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's really good. I think you kept hammering on people, prosperity, and what was that? Planet, people, planet, prosperity. So yes, we agree. I definitely do agree that value engineering should be seen from that perspective. But one other question I had was this thing about floating gardens.
Mm-hmm.
And that really blew my mind. But my question is, how commercially viable would that product be? I mean, it seemed to me, I have some experience from the oil and gas industry, so I know what gravity structures, the amount of engineering that goes into, gravity-based structures, etc. But I mean, doing that, having these very high conical, I'll take concrete structures and then mounting gardens on them. What's the economics like?
So it's a good question. The thing is that sometimes you have to throw an idea out there, not because you think this is going to be like, you have to throw to gauge what they want in terms of, do they want something spectacular or not? Because obviously we can have 6 towers, we can have 2 towers, we could reduce it. It's like, what image are they looking for from the client perspective? And sometimes you just need to go out there on a limb, and you know that it's more provocative, because actually our idea was actually to create a ring around the city. And normally what happens is someone gives us a brief like this and we go like this, and it's not that we want to be like egotistical, because we want the client to think a bit
out
bigger.
of the box.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's so interesting. So in your processes, like, how do you apply design thinking? Do you believe in design thinking? And how do you apply that, in developing your products?
Yeah, so there's new thinking now. Obviously, I think you should familiarize yourself with it if you're not yet familiar with it. There's the Circular Economy Design Guide, which is really interesting, because each time you are looking at materials, or you're thinking about circular economy all the time, it's at the forefront. There's the Beyond Net Zero, which is from the Design Council. Our methodology is a combination of all these: so circular economy, Beyond Net Zero, inclusivity. So at each project stage, from like right at the beginning, let's imagine tomorrow you say, you're the client, you say, can I have this thing? I would start questioning you. I would question your stakeholders. We have that initial assessment, and we do that, and we set a goal. I say to you, listen, so you want to create this, oh, that's a great idea. How about this and this and this? And you say, well, that's too much. But it starts to make you think, right? And then at the end of that first stage, the first RIBA stage, the concept stage, we'll say, okay, this is what that means. And let's imagine to provide jobs for this many people, it will cost this much additional for the project. Are you willing to do it? So at each stage, there are outcomes, and you might change your mind. You might say, right, well, I don't really want to, but I want to do that instead. But the whole idea is that it makes you think. You have your goals with your engineering team as well, because they are partners. Your structural, mechanical, are we going to use geothermal? Are we going to, that kind of thing. If you bring them in right at the beginning, already you start having those value conversations, I think.
Okay, thank you so much. I have a question from, I think I saw Engineer Matty's hands up. I'm sorry if I've not pronounced your name correctly, but that's what's written here. Please, can you go ahead and ask your question? Okay. Oh, sorry. I think then we take a question from.
What Engineer Matty was saying, just a complimentary. He says, awesome and eye-opener design of combining energy with architecture. But for me, it's not just engineering with architecture. That's what Ali's really presented here, and he's presented it so well. So I'm very, very proud of what he's done. So I saw quite a few architects on board. I know they haven't raised their hand, but I'm going to call them, whether they like it or not. Charlotte and the husband, Jürgen, please, what do you think of the work of this guy? Should we work with this guy from all the initiatives? We link the two of you, because they're into green engineering, and I mean green engineering. Wow. Okay, so Charlotte, please, let's find out how some synergy could go on there. What did you see in these guys' work that you think will be beneficial to green engineers? Green architecture, sorry.
Let me find the video. 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Charlotte, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. And as I really liked it. And you know, sometimes we feel that colleagues are not colleagues because the mindset is really too different. But in this case, I really liked it, and my compliment to your work, and with also your understanding of the Arabic, but also the African world, I would say. No, that's you. We are, you know, specialized in integrated energy design and sustainable architecture as well. My husband, he's in Denmark right now. Hello. That's why we are separate. And you know, I talked to Theo yesterday. And therefore we decided to take part today. And I called Jürgen and said, Jürgen, you will have to go on to NSE to this afternoon, because there's something that I think this is very interesting for us too, and also to learn you to know. So my compliment, also your way of presenting, my best point to you. And compliment for your work. Jürgen, yes. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, but I see a very crazy video of mine. Okay. I don't know what happened.
Oh, yes,
I'm looking like a mafiosi boss from I don't know from where. So I think it's better I switch it off, and so yeah. But my congratulations. It is really an amazing work what you have done, and I can feel, because I'm on this topic since nearly 40 years. And I think it's around 15 years ago when we visited the Emirates and talking about sustainability. And I really feel that they think we came from Mars. So because at that time, they heard a little bit about that, but they hadn't no understanding. So it was hard times to pray about sustainability. And it's nice that today around the world, it's more than less a common need. So mankind knows there is no alternative for us to survive if we don't find better and more intelligent solutions in combination with our nature. And your interpretation of culture, engineering and architecture is really great. And yeah, maybe we have the chance to meet each other and to have a, let's say, a discussion, because we are coming from a little other world. So I'm an old guy now, so and have my own biography, but sustainability and integration of energy and of culture. That, of course, is the idea of a holistic approach when it comes to architecture, and to involve people and to try to work with local materials is even so important for a lot of countries. They are now depend on imports and a lot of costs because of imports of materials, technologies, and components, and so on. So I think the way of thinking is very similar between us. So it would be a great pleasure to come together, maybe in London next time. So because we are situated in London as well, but we are in between. We are a small company focusing on projects that we are able to do personally. So because I stopped managing architecture and coming back to do architecture.
Right. Thank you very much. I don't know, Ali, if you want to respond to that. There wasn't any question.
For sure. I think it's a nice talk. I mean, it's a nice thing. Maybe we can start a movement, you know, I mean, all of you, because I mean, I'm really inspired by, I mean, Dr. P was the guy that was like the best engineer in our, and I couldn't touch him, you know, it's like, I was desperate. Like he was always looking up to him. So I feel like, well, if he's talking nicely about me, it's like very much, you know, someone up there who's like, wow. And then you guys also, you know, the work you're doing, I'd love to know more about you. We would love to see how we can maybe take something forward. You know, maybe we look at a site somewhere, Nigeria or anywhere, you know, and collaborate, or at least exchange ideas. I think that's really important if we can do that.
We have a lot in common, because like you mentioned, Dubai and Abu Dhabi many years ago, we were also already 2009 in Egypt, where I said back to future questionnaire, were the pyramids green? Yes, they were. Daylight, natural ventilation, and in order to catch them where they were. So, and we have been in Russia, you know, where they did not, they said energy efficiency, but they didn't know what it meant, but they have heard that they should start with this. No? So, and yeah, and we all of us burned also for Africa. So I think there might be a way, and we know Dr. P as well.
Okay.
If I can even chip in a word there, I mean, just like Charlotte said, we at the moment are talking to Jürgen and Charlotte about a lot of things regarding Nigeria. So we see sustainability engineering happening in Nigeria. So do they as well. But I believe definitely from what we have heard from you, yes, you see it happening also. If you could work in Madagascar, then Nigeria is not far away. So we look at that as well. So I just want to assure you, and I believe I'm speaking to everybody on in the London branch, this is not the end of our interaction with you. So definitely we are moving it forward by whatever means we have, and then definitely we're going to be having you in our corridor for a lot of things. However, I just want to reiterate a question that has been shining in my face. Sorry about this, Chinedu, on the chat. It's talking about 3D printing in Nigeria. What do you think?
Question to me?
Before you go to the Ali, sorry. We have a prominent engineer which has been raising up his hand, and I don't want him to get blood clot. Engineer Kule Adebayo. Engineer Kule Adebayo, please. He's the CEO of Arab Nigeria, I think, or Lagos Arab Nigeria. Wow. So Engineer Kule, please. I'm sure you know him, Ali. Please ask your question.
Well, thank you very much, particularly for relieving my hand. Because it's been aching for a little while.
Apologies, Engineer Kule.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I think it's been a wonderful session. Ali, I think your presentation has just been absolutely astounding, and I think the type of work you're doing is really amazing and inspiring, and it's good to see that you're collaborating well with Arab as well. We're here in Nigeria, and I'm sure at some stage we'll do likewise. My question really is, because the title is about change, social change, cultural change. One of the things I remember as a young engineer was being told by an architect about the importance of delight, what he referred to as delight in architecture, and looking at some of the buildings that you showed us in your presentation, it's very clear what delight is. It's really just, it doesn't need a description. You just look at it and you know you get the delight. However, as we've moved on in years, sustainability issues have become more in focus. We now know that the planet cannot sustain some of the fantastic structures that were done in the past. So I want to ask you what you think specifically concerning the responsibility that a designer, be it architect, engineer, or combination, has to actually effectively tell the client what he should get rather than what he wants. And by client, I'm referring even to the whole nation as such, because in Nigeria, we certainly feel that loads of air conditioning and glazing and Western things are, what causes that, what brings about that delight. What is the responsibility you feel we need to have to get people to appreciate local materials, ones which may not be, as they call it, sexy, but which are better for the environment?
Oh, I think they can be extremely sexy. I think it's in the right hands. They can be really, really inspiring. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening. I just saw a BBC program specifically on Nigeria and using local materials. I mean, we've made the mistake, and it's not just in Nigeria, it's throughout the world. You know, there's an idea that, you know, Western idea of the tall buildings, these are the solutions. And it's actually been a disaster. It's been a disaster in the Middle East. In China, they have urban sprawl, but they also have high-rise sprawl because all the towers are very close, and it's a horrible place to live. And they're creating problems for the future. Middle East, you have housing which is just spread out, you know, really like with no community facilities. It's a kind of, they've taken the worst of the West and actually thought that it's great, and actually that's not great. And what we need to do, what you guys need to do, Arab, is to really start educating those in power and also your clients to appreciate the subtleties, because, you know, isn't it nice to walk around a city and you're in shade and you don't have to have it, you know, because it's naturally, because buildings are close together, because people live like that, because it was the best thing in the environment. You know, we just think, oh, well, we have to have a big road. But actually, roads, if you look at London, they're trying to end the road. They're trying to turn it into a garden, and the Champs-Elysees is becoming a garden. So the West is has realized it's regret in doing this. But I think other nations, and your country in particular, and others, we just need to think, look, we're past that colonial era now, and we don't need to think about that. We need to think what's right for us. And there's an aesthetic there that is delight, and it could be wonderful. And I think we just need to bring it out. Sometimes it takes, you know, I'm not saying this in a way about we have an insight. I think we have an insight, particularly myself, in terms of where I'm from. Like Asian, my wife is Spanish, my daughter's from Madagascar, my parents are South African. So I have this kind of cultural and political baggage, which I try to bring into the work. So I think there's a sensitivity you need to have, and people have, when you operate in a different culture. Try to take the best from what's there and make people see, because sometimes they don't see it. You know, it's in front of their eyes, but they don't appreciate it. You think, listen, if you just clean this up and present it in a different way, this could be amazing. So I think we need to. You've got amazing, you know, architecture, historic architecture in your area. You just need to make it really obvious, and then you could win all these Aga Khan awards and, you know, all these kind of prizes about architecture, because actually it's there.
Thank you very much, Ali.
Thank you.
A couple of comments there. There are quite a lot of states in Nigeria now looking into architectures and all kind of things, how they could better their city, how they could design their new city better than what it was before. And I know that a state like Lagos State, they're really working hard on this. They're revamping some you know, landmarks to try their best to make the old city more livable now. And then there's new cities like Eco Atlantic being created, which is yours, reclaimed land and all that. So they're doing that, and they have this initiative which is looking at a Lagos State buildings and architecture concept. That's what they call it, because they have this housing of department for housing and department for works and all that, and everybody's looking at sustainability, climate change, this thing that really is affecting everybody over the world. So I could see one of the guys commenting there that fantastic, and they would like to do more with you. We are very well connected with them. So we will synergize that. We will see how we will make that happen, so that you'll be able to you know, speak to them or initiate things, or, you know, build the kind of building you're doing in the UAE. Love a landmark like that. Coming a few months ago, we had Albert from the name of that company now. Remember him? The architect, the engineer architect, building is fantastic.
Yes.
You know, a landmark that will attract people to
Sure.
Ghana. What you want to have a landmark like the House of Parliament or the Millennium Wheel.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that.
When we connect you and you. So then we now go on to the 3D that my chairman was trying to mention earlier. I think it was asked by one of our colleagues there, Dr. Moses. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question about 3D, feasibility of 3D in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you, Dr. P. Thank you, Ali, for the presentation. Yeah, I was just looking at it from the practical side of things. 3D printing is pretty energy intensive, and energy is in short supply in Nigeria and in most developing countries. So how feasible and how realistic is it to envision 3D printing as a way to achieve the architectural and engineering objectives that you envisage?
Okay, so very specifically, we're looking at that specifically for projects using clay or using earth for a particular client that wanted a digital museum made of earth. So obviously, a museum has a different budget, a different requirement. But I think also we're working with SABIC, which is SABIC is a petrochemical company that takes the products of petroleum and makes plastics and other things. And they actually 3D printed a car a few years ago. So they're well ahead of it. I think maybe even 10 years ago. So they're looking at using polymers and other kind of byproducts of petroleum in 3D printing. And now we're at a very early stage. Of course, you're right in terms of the energy use of the machine, but there are some savings in terms of using local materials. And I think we're at the early stage of testing and prototyping. I think the limitations of 3D printing are more that at the moment it seems very bespoke, and you can do bespoke things, but you might need to switch to prefabrication or a more systemic approach, a way of constructing things which is a bit more simple to execute in terms of like your machinery. But we're at an early stage. I mean, the manufacturer of this machine, they are from Italy. They're called WASP. I think you should look them up. They're quite good. It would be nice to do a wider trial. And I'm reading, every few months, I just get this new information saying that they're taking it a step further. They're taking it a step further. They're doing houses. So I think this technology could be quite interesting. It doesn't have to be specifically 3D printed all in its entirety, but there are ways and means of using materials, I suppose, efficiently. I think in the case of Nigeria, you've got a huge labor supply, and you probably want to think, about mechanization versus, good old-fashioned labor that you have available. I'm not saying don't use it, but there are other calculations that you need to make. Whereas in certain countries, cost of labor is really high. So I mean, China is also pioneering 3D printing, not because they have a labor shortage, because they want to pioneer technology. So I think we need to just be aware of all the things that are happening and prototype it. And these are great projects for Imperial or other institutions to get stuck in, I think.
Yeah, I think it's quite good what you're saying, because I've always wondered, for example, you refer to clay being used. I've always wondered why, say in Nigeria, for example, we jettison the so-called mud buildings because they didn't seem to fit the Western mode of construction. And we've all gone to using blocks and stuff that are actually more costly. And like you said, don't employ local labor. Whereas if people did buildings with mods, you can actually do human capacity development and find a better way of making mod houses more appealing.
Yeah, also they're cooler. Environmentally they're better because the building stays cooler. You know that as engineers, how the material performs. So yeah.
Yeah, I've never looked at it from the cooling side. Yeah, because like you said, I asked people in Nigeria why get a duvet and put on the air conditioner when you can design houses that are properly ventilated and not have to need air conditioners. Yeah.
So I think going back to your quick point about cost, because it's also an environmental cost these days. Making production of concrete blocks has an environmental cost, whereas the clay extracted from the site doesn't. Has a lower footprint.
I guess the question then is. Does clay have the structural properties, and do we have codes that will guide the design? I guess this is a question to Dr. Moses and Dr. Kunle.
I don't know if the codes exist, but all I can tell you is your clay.
It may not have the structural property, but if you are combining with other materials, to make sure it does.
Okay, but
So
SARS,
clay becomes the substantial the material that you use, but you combine with other material that will provide the strength, like clay with bamboo, or clay with that will strengthen it up to make sure you're able to carry the things you're trying to carry. Yes, and last
we don't yet have codes that can help us.
We don't have code, and that's where we engineers, that's where we're here for. I mean, myself and a couple of my colleagues sit on Nigerian codes and standards, and we've been trying to help Nigerian to develop its own code or to adopt existing code in a nice, cultural, friendly manner. Don't just cut and paste. You have to take it, look at it very deep, make some changes as necessary to make sure it fits the country's requirement and the capacity and the material we have on the ground. I've seen people specify C30 concrete. I guarantee you, when you test it, if you get C10 or C15, you'll be very lucky. So we need to make sure all these things are done properly.
I think
I would just add,
is probably denying the fact that there are story buildings that were made of mud walls, and walls by nature don't take tensile forces or compression, as long as what you just need to do is, like Dr. P is saying, is find a way to reinforce the mud bricks, and then of course they become effective load-bearing systems. Yeah, I think Engineer Kunle wants to come in.
Yes, I was just going to say, unfortunately, it just shows lack of commitment to R&D, to research and development, because really we've had these challenges. At the very best, you have a final year student doing a little study and it's thrown away and that's it, and really we do need to. And the reason for the lack of commitment is what we've been talking about as well, that you need to believe in it to even be committed to it. And I think that's why this talk today has been very useful, that if we know that this is the direction we should be taking, we shouldn't only assume that Western materials are it and best. Then we will commit to research and development, and very quickly we'll be able to calibrate exactly what the material properties are, etc., and use it. And as you use it more and more, then you eventually develop it better. So they don't have to start all at day one, but there must be a journey to get to. And I think, unfortunately, up till now, we've abandoned that journey altogether.
Right. Thank you very much, Engineer Kunle. That was very, very, very useful. And I've been banging about this for many, many years, to the extent I've even donate machinery to university in Nigeria for them to start doing research. Well, some of them do, some of them don't, and the few that do, they don't publish. When you do research, you need to publish. You need to make sure other people knows of your research. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper that sits on the shelf and collecting dust. All the research I do, it has to be instantly applicable. Otherwise, you won't see me there. So thank you very much for that contribution. I can't see anybody else on the chat that want to ask question, or anybody raising up their hands. If I've missed anyone, please speak out. Let us see you. Oh, Shinedu, you've raised your hand again. Please go ahead.
No, sorry, I've just asked my question. Yes.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
All right, okay. So on that note, I'm going to thank architect Ali Mangera for this amazing, beautiful, wonderful, exciting presentation. And if he has done anything less, I would have been disappointed. Because he's a true, real guy. If I could tell you a story about this guy, but no, maybe not.
I'm afraid of that. He knows my skeleton in the cupboard.
He's already sending me brown envelope.
Oh, I see.
Say that again.
I know where we're going. You're gonna.
Anyway,
you're like, hey, Ali. By the way,
we're not gonna. We're not gonna go there. I'm so pleased to see you. I'm so glad that you accept our offer to come and speak.
Thank
and I
you.
knew it's
I
gonna
love
be
it.
interesting,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it has been
yeah.
interesting. So thank you.
Yeah,
We
I'm
just
so
need to
happy to
take
be
it
there.
a bit. Yeah, we need to take it a bit further from here. We've worked together before, but this is now on a corporate level rather than just Ali and Sunday. We need to.
I've sent
we
my
need to step
email
it
to
up.
everybody in this chat. So if anyone wants to email me or have any questions, I think we should set up something else, or at least a group conversation and see what we can do next. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm passing you back to Chinedu or the chairman to wrap up the webinar.
Yeah, I'll quickly just say thank you very, very, very much. Thank you so much. It's been an exciting, and hopefully, like the chairman has said, we should collaborate and do something together, even if it's just maybe a podcast, or something. We should do something. So I'll pass you on to the chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't have any more to add, but also say thank you very much for everyone for your time. We should be doing something else on a Saturday, but for you to have taken time to join this webinar, then you must have had some very good interest. And I'm sure definitely you're not disappointed at all. It was a time well spent. And my profound thanks will go to architect, Ali. And like you said, definitely we have not seen the end of you. So definitely we are knocking on your doors, and you're now part of us now. So I believe we'll be doing a lot of things together. And something that Engineer Kunle Adebayo also mentioned regarding R&D is one of those things I want us to champion, and that is one of let's start thinking about that. Research and development is very, very crucial. Let's begin to think about that line. So Architect Ali, Charlotte, Dr. P, Engineer Kunle, so at least let's begin to think about that. And if anyone has got anything to bring, Dr. Moses, so if anybody has got anything to bring on the table regarding that, I think we can start doing that. And I believe definitely that's going to be adding value to the society in Nigeria. And definitely we are bringing something new to the table. So,
okay.
Thank you so much for that. And then from me and the rest of the team in London branch, have a wonderful day and the rest of the week. Remain blessed. Keep safe. And God bless.
You go, let me just make an announcement of our next event. Please, if everybody is still there, the next one is going to be on the 17th of July, and there we're going to have Dr. Bolu, who is a PhD holder from Imperial College many years ago, and also into material technologies, and he also runs a charity called African Child Trust. So he's going to talk about how engineering can influence society. I believe that's the topic of his talk. The 17th of July, the same time, the same place, 2 o'clock on our channel. We're going to be hearing from Dr. Kunle Onobolu. So thank you very much. You'll be seeing the flyer in few days' time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.